Anthologist. And if you're tuning in for the first time,
Might I interject? Hit that subscribe button.
and also hit that bell if you want to hear about any kind of news and things or whatnot that's coming up, or just to let us know that you like it. Today we are going to talk about the storyline before Superman called The Death of Superman and The Reign of the Supermen. Now, Superman, of course, as everybody already knows, is that he was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster back in 1938, and he's considered the first superhero.
Made his first appearance in Action Comics #1,
Exactly.
which is now at number 1006 right now.
Exactly. 80 years later.
Yeah.
So, with having it's about to be the 81st. It's
Jeez.
about to be the 81st anniversary of his first appearance in June
Right.
of 1938. Any case, getting back to the main point, there was a storyline that was released in the pages of Action Comics, The Adventures of Superman, Superman the Man of Steel, and Justice League of America, detailing the death of Superman storyline, dealing with a new villain by the name of Doomsday. Now, Doomsday, we will get into in another subject on another time.
But the way he was presented when he first started,
He was an unknown entity, basically, but he was,
coming from the depths of the earth at that time.
and he was one of those things that unrelentingly, unrepeatedly, kept coming, unabashedly. He was basically, Doomsday was coming, and he was basically hitting against a wall of iron.
Which was his prison where he
And
was in
that's
prison.
the thing. The way how it was set up, you didn't know that. He was hitting a wall of iron, and we didn't know that was his prison until finally, when they say Doomsday is here, he was able to release himself. But then, as a result of that, we find out that he was able to take on the Justice League, and he literally wiped the floor with them. And then once he wiped the floor, and mind you, the Justice League that you see in the animated cartoon, which we will discuss later on in a few moments, wasn't the same Justice League that you see in the comic. Getting back to the main storyline, Doomsday cuts across the countryside until eventually he gets to Metropolis with nothing but death and destruction.
Right.
And as a result, Superman ends up having to confront this being, and in turn, they basically were on equals. If not, Doomsday was a little bit more superior in terms of strength.
Yeah,
to
and he
him.
was one of those villains too that beat Superman pretty badly, where Superman was actually bleeding.
Exactly. He was
Right.
able to pierce his skin. He was able to break bones. He was able to do all the things that most people on Earth couldn't do. That finally, once they finally took each other out, Superman died in Lois Lane's arms. And he was able to save the city of Metropolis.
One thing I do have to interject. One thing I did not care too much for, though, the way how the fight ended between Doomsday and Superman, was that they put their all into punches, like they were betting the farm on the punches. And when I saw the panel, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, I was like, okay, but at least we'll talk about the adaptations that they've come out with afterwards.
Yes, yes.
But afterwards, after Superman died fighting Doomsday, there was Project
There was Project
Cadmus. That was basically, they took the body, Doomsday's body, and which at some point they were going to try to weaponize it, but then no, they felt like it was too dangerous. So eventually,
Of course, because you didn't find out later on until that Doomsday is a being that can regenerate.
Right.
You kill him, he'll come back stronger.
right, and then you can't kill him the same way twice either.
Exactly. So when they did set that up, they were able to get rid of him, but at the same time, they had the story which was called Funeral for a Friend, which will be highlighted in the Reign of the Supermen movie that's coming out later on.
Probably briefly or something.
Yes,
like
they're
that.
going to do it very briefly.
Because the story was so popular back in the day, and I'm speaking of just from experience. I remember going to the comic book store, standing in line just to get multiple copies of the book, and the book came in a polybagged black comic book with a bleeding S Superman symbol.
Oh, might I add too, the media had overhyped that book at
Right.
the time. And this was 1992, because this had never been done before. It was one of those things that DC Comics was trying to sell a whole lot of comic books at that time.
So that was kind of like shock value.
It was shock value that they took their flagship character, title, everything, and killed him off. And killing Superman off was a very, 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 very big deal at that time.
Right.
And like I said, it had never been done before, but then that led to another storyline which came up about almost a year later, which was in 1993, which was called The Reign of the Supermen.
And there was 4 different Supermen. There was John Henry Irons, known as Steel.
Yes, and then there was also the Superboy clone, who you find out later on was cloned from Cadmus. And then there was the Cyborg-Superman, who you find out later on who that particular person is and where he came from. And then the last one was Hank Henshaw. I was going to get into that in a bit, but also the last person was a Kryptonian artifact which had mutated and become the Eradicator.
Right, yeah. And the Eradicator basically was about preserving Kryptonian life.
And once it found out that the last Kryptonian had died, it had figured out a way to clone Superman's body in such a way that it made its own body in his image, so that way it could operate as a humanoid level, because it started off as a device that was created by one of Superman's.
Like a highly advanced computer.
Yes.
But it always wanted to preserve Kryptonian life at no matter what and no matter the cost.
Exactly.
But at some point, it became sentient.
Eradicator, like I said, put him in the regeneration matrix. And then you had Superboy, which was a clone. Now, at that time, before they retconned his origin, that Superman clone was basically not infused with any of the programming that they want him to be. So basically, Cadmus was going to create their own version of Superman. But they couldn't decipher Kryptonian DNA the way that they wanted it to. So as a result, they had to mix human DNA with Kryptonian.
You know the human DNA, you know what they mixed it with, right?
Well, originally we thought, and it was set up and established, it was the head of Cadmus that was supposed to be.
But it wasn't.
And it wasn't, no.
It was Lex Luthor.
It was Lex Luthor who ended up having the side of the human DNA mixed in with the Kryptonian DNA to create the Superboy clone. And then you had Steel, John Henry Irons, who was basically who was a weaponsmith. He was basically a retired weaponsmith, but was just living his life until he saw that some of his inventions were being used to kill others in the streets. So that's why he ended up donning the armor,
right,
to try to not only close back the Pandora's box of his technologies that he's created, but also try to honor the name of Superman, who had saved his life some time before and told him to make it. He says, "Thank you for saving my life," and he said, "Well, make it count."
And the key factor with this one is, out of the 4 Supermen, this one wore a suit of armor and could fly, but under the volition of his suit, similar to like Iron Man.
Right.
But he also
a low-level version
of Iron Man. Yeah. But he carried a sledgehammer.
Like John Henry Irons, the steel driving man, that is of course a folklore. And then you had the Cyborg-Superman. And the Cyborg-Superman, you find out later on in the story, is Hank Henshaw. And that was basically one of 4 characters that had went into space, got hit with some kind of radiation.
And it was kind of like a slight riff on the Fantastic Four.
Exactly.
But it had unfortunate side effects for all 4 of the astronauts.
And Hank Henshaw himself had evolved into a sentient being of energy. So that's how he was able to convert whatever mechanisms or whatever machinery he wanted to for his own means. And he ended up coming across the Kryptonian matrix, which brought Superman to Earth. He basically was able to manipulate it in such a way to create himself a body, which became the Cyborg-Superman that we know of.
Yeah, half machine, half man, and have the man part look like the actual Superman, but with just part of his face.
And the machine part is all Kryptonian technology based off of the Kryptonian birthing matrix that, like I said, that brought Superman to Earth.
But see, the twist of it too was that basically Hank Henshaw turned out to be the bad guy out of the reign of the Superman.
Exactly. He was the one that was he wanted to take revenge for the death of his wife against Superman and mess up his name completely.
Yeah, he committed genocide to do that by destroying Green Lantern's home city of
Coast City.
Coast City.
Yes, he destroyed Coast City and tried to turn that into a second version of War World. Turn it to Engine City, because he was basically his whole goal was to convert the planet Earth into a new War World, but the Coast City was going to be the engine, one of the engines for the new War World, and he ended up trying to also destroy Metropolis, because that was going to be the second engine. But Superboy was able to thwart and defeat that particular bomb that was going to do the
See,
same.
the whole thing was with Hank Henshaw being exposed as one of the Supermen. Basically, that also paved the way for the return of the original Superman, because basically Hank Henshaw's character as the Cyborg-Superman had damaged the Eradicator
So badly.
so badly, but then when the Eradicator went back to go rejuvenate himself
In the Fortress of
Solitude, Kal-El's body was gone.
Because basically the Kryptonian Matrix,
Regeneration
Matrix had it released him because he had completely healed up. So therefore, it was no need for him to be inside. He ended up having to rely on the help of Superboy,
And
Steel,
and Supergirl.
and Supergirl eventually. But it's not the Supergirl that you know of, but Supergirl, which was the
Matrix.
The Matrix, of course. And they had to go to Coast City, or what's left of it, Engine City, and to confront Hank Henshaw head on.
The next part, or the next adaptation, which they did live action, they did that in Batman vs. Superman, where the only problem was they crammed too much in at one time.
Yeah, but the thing is, when you cram too much in at one time in terms of a particular project, they should have learned from
Spider-Man 3.
Exactly. You don't put too many villains in one film like that, because you had Doomsday, who was, might I add, was basically a derivative of General Zod.
His body, anyway, from at the end of from Man of Steel when Superman snapped his neck.
Exactly. And then you had Lex Luthor, and then you had KG Beast, which is a Batman villain.
And also, they had a little bit of Steppenwolf that was in the
Yes, they introduced the death of Superman into the Batman vs. Superman movie, Dawn of Justice. But like I said, it was one of those things that was not well done. I mean, I appreciated the fight scenes and loved the choreography and the special effects of it. But it was just one of those things that they just rushed it to try to capitalize on what was happening with Marvel with their films. But
they also had a scene in there where all three, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman, took on Doomsday. And ultimately, Superman made the ultimate sacrifice fighting Doomsday again. But this time, the way Superman was taken out in this one was nothing like how it was done in the comic books. And might I add, too, one thing I did like in the animated Death of Superman film was that the end fight between Doomsday and Superman, when they fought, the way how that ended, that's how you end a fight.
Well, and that's the way how you should have ended it in the comic book. Just looking at it, I said, oh, they should have done this in the first place. But I don't think they would have thought about that back in 1992 when they first did the storyline.
Right.
Versus now it's 2018 when they finally
because when I watched the animated movie, I was like, that's how you end the fight between Superman and Doomsday.
Well, yeah, it was done right.
Not the punch, all you can in one punch. I could not, even after those years after reading it, I was just kind of like, but Death of Superman, the way how that fight ended, that's how you end a fight between Superman and Doomsday.
Yes. They gave it some credence. So when you get the chance, it will be out on January 29, 2019, The Reign of the Superman. And if you haven't done so already, please get a chance to read the Death of Superman storyline.
Or if you don't have time, watch the Death of Superman animated movie.
Please avoid Superman Doomsday.
Yeah, don't.
You'll just waste your time.
Don't.
Because it seemed good at the time, but now just looking back on it,
no.
It was just terrible. Just
straight terrible.
Just terrible. No, don't do it. In any case, this is another edition of the Comic Anthologist, and once again, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And if you need to reach us with any kind of questions, you could reach us at thecomicanthologist@gmail.com. And I want to get into more details in terms of now you have the current versions of the Justice League that fought Doomsday in the Death of Superman storyline. But that's where they made their differences. But I'm done with that.
We could also, at some point in the future too, let's talk about Doomsday himself and where he came from.
Yes, Doomsday himself has a very, very interesting background in terms of his history, backstory, everything. And you would be surprised from where he came from. Until then, this is the Comic Anthologist. Thank you for tuning in, and peace.